looking at the problem of adaptation from the perspective of communities, localities, real people on the ground trying to make a living, etc. Then I'd like to comment as an example. We were asked to put up good examples of adaptation. I have established there aren't very many good ideas or good examples of adaptation which go beyond the study process. I've been lucky enough to be involved over the last 2 years as an international advisor on a European Union financed project in the Andean countries on risk management, disaster risk management. I come from a disaster risk management school of thought, not from the climate change, although we are now merging our ideas as we go along, as is obvious has to be done. And as part of that project, we had the opportunity to open up a competition, let's call it, whereby we received 160 examples of different types of intervention at the local level, related in some way to the reduction of what we call disaster risk. And what we did was to get down to 16 of these. And last week we had a final meeting where the 4 best cases, which is always very difficult to say which are the best cases, were chosen. And I'd just like to make some final comments with regard to adaptation on the basis of those examples of intervention in the Andean countries, where 12 of the 16 interventions were in fact at the rural level and not the urban level, which is again itself very interesting for an area which is 78% urban, but still a lot of the ideas of disaster and climate change seem to relate to rural areas, and the urban areas tend to get postponed in some way. A good part of adaptation to climate change seems to be going in Latin America through the disaster risk community and the disaster risk management ideas. We know there is this contrast between an adaptation to climate change and disaster risk reduction. Even the terminology, like the use of the word mitigation, etc., is different, and there is a certain distance between them that we have to close. Luckily, in Latin America, since Mitch, there has been a very big push on the part of NGOs, civil society organizations, and even government to get into what is being called local level risk management. That is, local risk management based on communities or based on localities. And a good part of the adaptation work is being pushed into this as, and I don't want to use this in a derogatory fashion, as a tag-on factor, and a very good way of tagging on the idea of adaptation to climate change. Consequently, when we look at the projects which we set up, which we selected for 16, they are typified by a couple of very clear points of view as regards reducing disaster risk and adaptation to climate change. And that is to go in through the development angle. That is to go from development to risk, and not risk to development. That is, that the major preoccupation of these activities is improving people's living conditions and looking at the environmental constraints as constraints for achieving that, and building in risk reduction and climate change adaptation into that central framework. And so when we look at the 16 cases that we put together, they are typified by an entrance to the problem of risk reduction adaptation, either through land use planning and territorial organization, through environmental management, through river basin management, or through strategies for improving livelihoods, incomes, and employment. And on top of that, the environmental factors which could reduce the opportunities for development are built into this. And this is done by rural communities, indigenous communities. And we think this is very instructive, because from a southern perspective, if we don't get into any problem through the development for human welfare angle, then it is likely to be marginated when faced with other more pervasive social demands in society. The lessons from this, and this is my last point before they give me the there you are. Very good. There we are. The lessons which have been drawn for this type of intervention based on a risk management, local risk management strategy is, firstly, you go in through development. Secondly, Participation in the generation of knowledge and the understanding of knowledge in decision making is absolutely fundamental on the part of the subjects, the actors at a local level. The third is, if we cannot get appropriation and ownership of the projects, we are not going to have sustainability and much less replicability. And even though we work at a local level, which is where people leave out their lives, their livelihoods are sustained, although we work at the local level, if we are incapable of scaling up, of integrating our local level activities with regional, national, even international political dictates, it is highly likely we will not go very far on risk reduction or adaptation as such. And the last point is, the closer we can get to integrated approaches which take into account what we're calling in Latin America corrective risk management and prospective risk management. Corrective being getting rid of problems that already exist, prospective anticipating future problems, and reactive management. The greater we get towards a more integrated approach, the more successful we are likely to be in helping communities or supporting communities or going along with communities and localities in creating more secure conditions now and in the future. Thank you very much.